even though the Tennessee coach believed he didn't do anything wrong. Then McDaniel claims that Jones wanted McDaniel to cut his hair to get his spot back on the team. Kurt Busch won the Bass Pro Shops NRA night race on Saturday night at Bristol Motor Speedway, and following him was Kyle Larson, Chase Elliott, Joey Logano, and Eric Jones. Sam Jordan, News Talk 92.7 Action Sports now.
Nuga Radio.
Are you brain dead? Still voting for pathetic liberals? Take 3 hours of Sean Hannity from 3 to 6.
Nuga Radio.
Then call us in the morning between 9 and 11.
92.7
Nuga Radio.
Good morning, good people. It's a gloomy day in the city of Chattanooga, but if you are alive, if you're awake, you're doing all right. Somebody didn't wake up this morning, and so be grateful. It's Marie Mott taking it from the streets to City Hall, from City Hall to the mayor's office. Can't leave out the police department. From the Valley Low to the mountaintop, giving you guys a bird's eye view to what's going on in the city of Chattanooga. Good morning. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Today is Monday, the start of the week. And you guys know what it is when you tune in to my show. I'm not covering any fluff pieces. I don't really talk about politics too much. I'm talking to you, my community member, my friend, my church member, just you, the listener, trying to get you to activate the power that you already have. Because a lot of times people throw around the word, and I like to think about things and then reframe them so we can start changing ourselves and being the change that we want to see, and then start impacting our community. A lot of people love using the word empower. They throw out the word empower. I don't have to empower you. You already got the power. I just want to help you activate it so we can begin to change some things, shift some things here in our community, right where we are. Today, we're going to talk about a tough subject because I wanted to cover race today, but I had a conversation with my mother this past weekend, and she said, baby, if we're going to talk about race and helping people understand race, you first have to give a context, a historical context to slavery. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about chattel slavery, because one thing that we have to acknowledge whether we want to or not, is that chattel slavery is the reason why we have an America. Regardless of the fact of somebody came and supposedly discovered this land, that the British Crown transported people here. They weren't black people originally that came here. They were the poor and the destitute of English society that were transported here. We did not see slavery much until after we saw colonies and plantations start popping up over here. But we got to give a historical context, not only to how slavery happened, but why it's important that we have to acknowledge it and have this conversation prior to us having a conversation about race, right? Now, let me state some facts here. We're going to get into some factual information. And I want you, if you don't have a pen or a pencil, bookmark this, because I'm always streaming live on Facebook, Nuga Radio, Facebook page 92.7, on YouTube, as well as my personal Facebook. Bookmark this. Go back and do your own homework. All right, folks? Chattel slavery. We're going to talk about it today. Okay? What countries were involved in the transatlantic slave trade? It was England, France, and Portugal. Spain was involved in the slave trade, but Spain did not have ships that they sent to go get their own slaves. They commissioned France, Portugal, the Netherlands, and Italy, and more countries probably that have not been named, to go and to obtain slaves from Africa and bring them into Spain. Now, we're going to go way, way back. We're going to talk about some things today. Chattel slavery is what we're talking about, because we're going to be talking about race this week. How was race created? Why? We'll have some tough conversation, folks, because we need to understand something. And it's important for me to cover something like this on the show, because for a fact, for the listener who may not be African American or may not have a good relationship with anybody who's of African American, who is a descendant of African American slaves, our history has relatively not been recorded into American history, really kind of in my lifetime. It's kind of when it happened. Even when I think back of going through the public educational system here in the city of Chattanooga, the history that I learned about my people, even here and abroad, was always very brief and limited. And if you look back, one of my favorite revolutionaries was James Baldwin. You go back and you listen to some of James Baldwin's speeches. One of the things that we were taught was that as African Americans, we did not have a history. And one of the things that a lot of us, what we do know, what little we have learned about family history, if we do know anything from a personal standpoint about slavery or about any of our ancestors that came before us, it comes through oration. Our history never really had the ability, not from our perspective, to be recorded. And interestingly enough, a lot of the information that we learn about chattel slavery or slavery as we experienced it here in the Americas, we do not learn from the people who really survived it or went through it. Only a handful, like people like Frederick Douglass and others. We often find out about chattel slavery and slavery through the eyes of those who participated in it. Okay. And so it's interesting and important that we understand kind of how this dynamic happened. So if we go back in history, and we'll start with the Roman Empire. Now, Africans had participated in Roman society for a very long time. The Roman Empire had a heavy presence in Africa because Africa has always been the breadbasket, as it is even today. Africa is the breadbasket of empires. If not until the last couple of hundred years, what predates labor, free labor that Africa offered to various empires throughout the world, we have an abundance of natural resources that are in Africa. Even now, bananas, rubber, gold, diamonds, cobalt, things that even operate your cell phone. Africa now is the breadbasket of all empires. There is no daily operation without Africa. Let's make that plain. There is no daily operation without Africa, and that is historical. So we have a heavy African presence, a heavy Roman presence in Africa. And this happens where, because slavery, when we contextualize or we talk about slavery, often people kind of jumble slavery into this one-size-fits-all understanding. And when I talk about slavery, I understand that slavery, as it is throughout history, slavery, as it is in conversation, is different depending upon the time and the people that we're discussing. And all slavery is not the same. And so when we talk about chattel slavery, which we experience here, that we experience in the Caribbean, that we experienced in Europe, that is not the same as, because a lot of people will say, well, the Africans had slaves. Understand what slavery looked like in Africa. Okay, we did not transport people all throughout the world. Let's start with that. Yes, did Africans own slaves? Yes, they did. But it was more or less a situation, and if you want to call and chop it up with me, 800-8949. It was more or less a situation that came about out of wars or skirmishes. It wasn't something that happened because the African woke up and decided that they were going to take advantage of their brother or their sister from afar. It was more or less a result of a fight. And certainly we never shipped our kin or distant kin, relatives. We never shipped them across the world as a means of free labor. That didn't happen. And now when we talk about Rome and African society, there were Africans who had the ability to, they were over libraries, they were dignitaries. They had the ability to integrate into Rome society and be well respected. That was until the Conference of Nicaea, all right, where we see Constantine. Hold on one second, I'm gonna bring you on. Oh, did I hang up? The Conference of Nicaea, where we have Constantine that basically removes, because we had even had African popes, that basically removes our footprint throughout Roman society. And so because of some of the struggles that we find prior to the fall of Rome, we see where Rome is having a really difficult time maintaining a foothold in Africa. And because of this, Arabs were able to come in and raid Rome. All right. The raid on Rome happened in about 845. They were able to come in and raid Rome. And this is where we began to see the fall of Roman society. And part of the Africans participating in this was because we were tired of what was happening to us in Roman society. And so we wanted to get the Romans off of our back. And so the Arabs came into this situation and decided that they were going to help us. And this is often a problem, a weakness of my people, even now, is that we're so loving. We are a very loving and accepting people that often we don't acknowledge the intentions of people outside of our community until it's far too late. So it's always been that way. We'll welcome just about anybody, and we won't figure out that they got our demise, that they're plotting and planning to take advantage of us until it's much too late. So we see the Arabs come in and they replace the Romans. And this is really where we began to see a form of slavery. And we see where, in particular, Portugal, which had built relationships on the western coast where a good portion of slaves came from, they had built a relationship with Africans, and we see them begin to transport slaves on much of a minor scale. Now, when we talk about slavery, I want to jump ahead a little bit and help you understand what slavery really is. So when we talk about chattel slavery, the difference of what that means. Chattel slavery is basically that people are commodity, they're property. Nothing more, nothing less. They can be sold and traded at will, right? That is chattel slavery. Now, often what we see that people try to bunch into chattel slavery is bonded labor, forced labor, forced marriage. These situations that even happen unto now, such as serfdom, penal labor, which what we still have, because I don't know if you guys saw the article of the fires that are going on in California, and it first started with juvenile detainees were fighting the fires. We got children here in America because they are locked up in juvenile in juvenile detention centers. They are being forced, I would feel. I don't see any child volunteering to put out no forest fire. Used to put out fires. So we have this more of de jure, because we talked about this kind of before when we talked about the color of law, the difference between de jure and de facto. We have this de jure slavery. It didn't just happen, it was intentional. Now, prior to the European that really not only entered the slave trade, but took it to a whole nother level. The Europeans had already gone through a lot of problems on their own. So we see where the Europeans had, we have the plague. They had gone through a lot of internal wars amongst themselves, a lot of bickering, a lot of fighting. They were exhausted. They had experienced famines. And so not only had this exhausted their society and what they had, but it also underpopulated the people that they had in European society. And so we start seeing, it really kind of was, they got into it a little bit by accident. It really wasn't intentional. But the reason kind of was that they were very upset that the Catholic Church, under the leadership of the Pope, had already been allowing Portugal to get into the slave trade ahead of them. Now, Portugal didn't have nearly some of the means that European society had. The Portuguese had exhausted a lot of their own personal wealth, sending conquistadores to Brazil. Okay. So not only did the Europeans get into the slave trade, but then they got into the slave trade with a vengeance. And then we began to see, as European society spread out through the new Americas, thank you to the supposed discoverer of America, Christopher Columbus, and the building up of colonies, which extended into plantations. We have to understand that the Europeans had never had a lot of, because there's not really a lot of natural resources in Europe, just like it's not a tremendous amount of natural resources here in the Americas. A lot of the crops and different things that we have here in America, they were brought here from other places. Sugar cane, cotton, and different things. So a lot of the things that we even grew here, they're not originally from here. So European society did not really have things like chocolates, spices, all of this stuff. That's why if you look at South American cuisine and Caribbean cuisine and even Asian cuisine, a lot of the spices are all similar, are the same. They all come from Africa. Because whether people want to admit it or not, we had already sailed the world a long time before Christopher Columbus. We had already set out to take what we have, because we are givers. My people are givers. Take what we have to trade and to give to people wherever we went. And so that's how you find our spices, African spices in the Caribbean. That's how you find them in Asia. We had already done this. Okay. So European society had nothing like this. They didn't have sweets. They didn't have spices. So they went in search of things that they never had. And somebody along the way figured out, hey, we don't have enough people here. And we need to get ourselves back together. Famine has ruined us. We've been fighting and exhausting our coffers, as well as disease has just riddled through our society. The way that we see the building up of empires is through free labor. Let me say that again. There is no England or English society. There is no American society without free labor. Without free, completely free labor. Y'all understand that? There is no America without free labor. There was nothing here. And what little was here, it wasn't enough to really make this beautiful, bolstering society. We see America turn into this wealthy society because of free labor. Are we following? And the crazy thing is that it was something that was allowed to happen through the Catholic Church. Oh, I'm stepping on toes. The Catholic Church is going through a whole lot But the Catholic Church, through Pope Nicholas V, sanctioned that basically if you weren't a Christian or considered a Christian, that you could be made a slave. So this is kind of the history, a beginning of the history. We're going to keep getting into it as we go into the second half. And I just want to help you guys. Keon Rose, Nick LaFew, and others are going to be broadcasting live from Starbucks on the North Shore at 10. And they have the Thursday night Gridiron Gang show every Thursday. So I want you guys to tune into that as well and continue to tune in to the Marie Mott show, the David Tula show. But we want to understand the context of chattel slavery because we're going to get into race later on this week. And I want you guys to understand this information. Just like a lot of my people don't know it, I'm sure there are other people who may not have any understanding of this history. How did it happen? And why is it important that we embrace our history in order to move forward as a country? Even here, moving forward in the city of Chattanooga. Stay tuned, you guys, for the second half of the segment.
Chattanooga Radio, Digital FM 95.3 HD4, 92.7 FM's news now.
A Rossville man stabbed to death, another savagely slashed. This happened on Rogers Road. 62-year-old LeBron Hankins was stabbed to death. When officers arrived, they found him lying on the ground. Another man was stabbed in the same fight. He rushed to the hospital. No charges have yet been pressed. An RV burned to the wheels on Mowbray Mountain. Tri-County Community Fire Department reports a total loss. Only the frame and the wheels remained. Miraculously, nobody was hurt. And the parking lot in front of Firehouse Subs in Hickson opened up, revealing a gaping sinkhole. A wrecker had to be called to tow a car away. Nobody was injured. This is far from the first time a sinkhole has revealed itself in Chattanooga. Just recently, one opened up in the parking lot of Walgreens. CFD spokesman Bruce Garner tells WRCB the owner is responsible for any repairs that need to be made. Val St. John for Nooga Radio, News Talk 92.7, Action News Now.
Let's face it, Old Faithful isn't as faithful as it used to be. Constant repairs are a hassle and can rack up quick in money and time. Landers McClarty Ford can fix that. Right now, you can get a 2016 Ford Focus, 34,000 miles, only $11,491. A 2017 Chevy Spark with only 17,000 miles for less than $12,000. A 2015 Volkswagen Jetta with less than 21,000 miles for $11,991. Yeah, browse their entire inventory of new and new-to-you cars, trucks, and SUVs online at LandersMcCartyFord@FortPayne.com. Landers McClarty Ford of Fort Payne. If you can't find your next perfect ride, they'll go find it for you. Big city selection, small town prices, friendly service, and top dollar for your trade. The savings are waiting and only a short drive away, so what are you waiting for? Get started with your personalized shopping today at Landers McClarty Ford of FortPayne.com.
Nooga Radio.
Roar into Talladega.
Hello? Who am I speaking with? Eric, you're our winner. Really?
You'll receive tickets for all three races between the Camping World Truck Series, Xfinity Series, and the Monster Energy Cup races.
Holy cow.
In addition, you'll receive a 2-night stay at the Microtel Hotel and restaurant accommodations at 2 area restaurants.
Nooga Radio.
Roar into Talladega.
Nooga Radio.
92.7.
Your NASCAR racing station. Nooga Radio 92.7 FM.
Nooga Radio 92.7.
Join Nooga Radio and the Gridiron Gang live from 7 to 9 at Starbucks at 10 North on the North Shore. We're talking all things high school football. There's a specialty brew or refresher weekly inspired by the game of the week. Sweet treats, extended hours all season long, and we're pet friendly. Portions of all proceeds support local schools and educational scholarships as well as after-school programs. It's football time in Tennessee. Join us every Thursday live from 7 to 9 at Starbucks, 10 North, your North Shore neighborhood living room.
Your home is a constant work in progress. Repaint the walls? Yeah, easy enough. Leaky faucet? There's a video for that. But roof repair? You might want some help. That's where Chattanooga Roofing Contractors come in. They have 3 generations of roofing excellence you can count on. Leave the ladder in the garage. Go to chatroofing.com. That's chatroofing.com for Chattanooga Roofing Contractors, a roofing company you can trust.
Hey, Karen, you need me for that 1 o'clock?
Yes, Cheese, please. Karen, did you get the quarterlies done? Yep, they're filed in the cabinet.
Karen, can you describe the initiatives to the new hire? Thanks.
Oh, sure. Full-bodied, some floral notes, maybe a hint of dark chocolate.
Am I in the right department?
Got wine on the mind? Come unwind at Virgola. Italian wine, oysters, caviar, cheeses, and more. Perfect after work or a romantic date night. Virgola Italian Wine Bar, 608 Georgia Avenue.
Man, you sure you know what you're doing?
Yeah, I worked with my dad on his truck all the time. Just one more bolt to go.
Yeah, wrong bolt. Today's truck ain't your daddy's truck. For repairs on today's vehicles, you need Amco Transmission and Total Car Care of Chattanooga on Lee Highway. Stay on the road, not in the garage. Amco Transmission on Lee Highway. Get it done the right way. The Thompson Pet way. Yeah, I just put that anywhere.
Now, Rick wants you to buy on U.S. Gold American coins. Are you tired of making 1% on your investments with the banks? Even 2 or 3% at best? Now, Rick wants you to buy on U.S. Gold American coins.
Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds, Brainerd Road. Chattanooga weather.
After some patchy morning fog, expect more warm and humid weather for your Monday. A few scattered afternoon showers and storms will pop back up, highs mid-80s. Tonight, a lingering shower or storm possible, lows 70 to 72. Scattered showers and storms will move off to the south and east Tuesday, drier and pleasant for the midweek. Looking to buy or sell a home? Real Living Southern Realty provides real answers and customized marketing solutions. Serving the entire tri-state area, and check rlsouthernrealty.com for more. And I'm Soren Sheep, 12 Sheep Meteorologist, Pastor 4.
The radio 92.7.
Oh, it's the Marie Mott Show. No fluff pieces. We got to have some tough conversations on my show. We got to talk about some things that maybe you're probably not going to hear anywhere else. You're probably not going to hear on any other radio show, on television, on social media. People really talking about chattel slavery, what I consider to be the African Holocaust. I have kind of I guess you could say, while we're going through the break, I stream live on my personal Facebook, and I kind of give some sentiments off camera and off the air while I'm waiting for people, waiting to go through our commercial break. And, a lot of people will probably be like, oh, my God, she's talking about chattel slavery. Why is she doing that? Well, I can do that because it's my show. But I think it's really important because let's be real. When we have these conversations about race or about slavery, either of the two, a lot of people get very, very, very intimidated about these conversations. Good morning. Talk to me.
Hi, Marie. I'm going to challenge you a little bit. First thing I want to say is 600,000 white people from the North died to free the slaves. Let's not forget that. Let's also not forget there was no slavery in the North, very little. And there were Italian and Irish immigrants that were really used as slaves or chattels during the Age of Reason or the Industrial Revolution. So let's forget that. It's always poor people that are abused. There's two facts I want to point out. It was primarily in the South, but everyone had slaves in those days. I'm not justifying it, but there was a lot of black slaves in Africa. Blacks sold blacks into slavery because it was common for that day. But I don't know any shred of evidence that shows that any blacks beat Christopher Columbus. That's a myth. Just like Leif Erikson is a myth because there's no scientific evidence to back it up. Matter of fact, the American Indians even immigrated to America. They weren't originally here. They are descendants of the Chinese. They came to America during the Ice Age about 12,000 years ago, when they could actually walk from China to America. So the American Indians aren't even native to America. They're basically Chinese. So now if you have facts to retort that, we'll give you a couple of days, and I'd love to hear it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for the comments on that. Now, it's interesting enough that we have the Irish slaves, which is often something that is brought up. I think it's very, very important for us to understand when we talk about the British colonies here in Northern America. And this is why it was important for me to talk about the level of what we consider to be slavery. Slavery is not all identical or equal. When we talk about people who love to, and this is not to discount what might have happened to other peoples here in the Americas, but let me make one thing emphatically clear, and it cannot be debated. And that is, chattel slavery is not the same as slavery. It's not the same as indentured servitude. It's not the same as serfdom. It's not the same as anything that came out of the feudalist society from British, from our British brothers and sisters. That is not the same. Indentured servitude is not the same as being able to be worked, as well as being able to be sold or traded at will. It's not the same. And it's certainly not the same when we get to talking about which we're going to talk about later this week. When we start talking about race, this is why it was important for us to classify people. Because as long as you were not considered a Negro, even if you had to work against your will, even if you had to pay out work as a means of paying off a debt, you still. Now, we can't really argue this. And part of this has to be thought about from a respectful manner towards my people, towards African-American people, right? Because when we have this conversation, because race and slavery is a very insensitive topic, we can't really have it. And one of the things that I would say to people who are not African-American, when we have this conversation, I need you to listen. Not listen to respond or to rebut, but I really need you just to listen. Because the truth of the matter is that when you have to talk from a context of what you learned or what little you know about your family history, because you don't have a family history, right? Shucks, my grandmothers didn't even have birth certificates. And when we're talking about people who are beyond my grandmothers, we're talking about people who, my relatives who were coming out of slavery. So when we have this conversation, let's have it with a level of respect. And there is a blog, and I'm going to talk about it later this week when we start talking about race, a blog which spawned into a book. The reasons why I'm tired of talking to white people about race. It has to deal with a lot of just these sentiments right here. But we can't have this conversation without people trying to parallel what has happened throughout history. Because it was important for me to say this as far as going back to Roman society. But slavery is an institution that has been around for ages, practically almost since the beginning of time. Slavery has been around for a very long time, long before people were traded, captured, sold, and brought to somewhere else. Understand, and that's why I said slavery is not the same depending upon the time that we're talking about, the people we're talking about, and where we're talking about. And when we're talking about African people owned slaves, I already said it earlier in the show. Did we own slaves? Yes. Do we have to acknowledge that history? Absolutely. But we never had a system where we shipped our own brothers and sisters and cousins and distant relatives off throughout the world. We didn't build that system. We may have participated in it, but we didn't build it. Okay? I can acknowledge that we participated in that. Absolutely. Did we have our own slaves prior to European chattel slavery? Yes, we did. Do we have to acknowledge that? Yes, we do. But did we create the system of chattel slavery and perpetuate it? No. Did we use our own ships to ship our people across the world for free labor? No, we did not. We did not do that. Now, we may have sold slaves. And prior to chattel slavery, we had slaves. Again, that was a result of skirmishes and wars. And it wasn't chattel slavery. A lot of people in African society,
a lot of people owned slaves, but they had the opportunity to be brought into a society. Now, they may not have been at the certain level of people, right? Because they come from a tribe that may have gotten ransacked, destroyed, or whatever, right? But please, I'm begging people, if we're going to have this conversation, let's be respectful. There is no other historical representation of slavery in the form of chattel separate from the European. Even the Portuguese and the people who got into the slave trade long before the European didn't really have it even to the scale of Europeans. And so, and then when we talk about, and let me get back on the Irish. When we talk about the Irish, I think it's very, very important that we contextualize them, that a large number of them were indentured servants. And they immigrated to the North Americas, and they provided cheap labor, and they were exploited. I'm not going to deny that. Talk to me.
You're not making me want to care. What do I care? Who cares?
Who cares about what?
6 people died in Chicago over the weekend. Why do I care about history that I learned in 3rd grade? Make me want to care. Why do I care?
I shouldn't have to
make bills to pay. I got things to do. What?
I shouldn't have to make you want to care. I shouldn't have to make America
want to care.
I don't have to make anybody care. I shouldn't have to make anybody.
You do. You got to make me. Why do I care? I don't know how we're going to stop another 56 people from dying in Chicago over the weekend. Blacks shooting blacks.
Okay, we're going to focus on this conversation because
make me care.
Okay, when people say make me care, the reality is that I really can't make you care. I could talk about this and we can acknowledge what we want to, because the reality is that this is our history, whether we want to put our hands on it or not, whether we want to wrap our hands around it or not. This is our history, folks. And to deny the African experience here in the Americas through slavery is to deny your brother and your sister. Would you deny your family member of their experience, maybe because you don't like it or you didn't have to go through it? If that's how I make you care, let me make it personal for you. If you are a family member, right, and you love your family, you appreciate your family, you're solid, you're there for your family, you're dependable, that means that you are there no matter what they go through. And you find yourself being a foundational support system, whether they go through things that you agree with or not, or they go through things that you experience or not. That's what family does. And we are a family here in America, because the last time I checked, when I got my DNA tested, I'm not 100% African American. So somewhere along the line, I got a brother or a sister. I may be walking past a relative that I don't even know here in Chattanooga. And why? Because at one point, someone in my family didn't have the ability to be asked if they wanted to be slept with or not. They were raped and taken advantage of under the umbrella of chattel slavery. So I don't have to make anybody care. If you want to call yourself a patriot, let me talk to you for a minute. If you want to call yourself a patriot and you love America so much, you got to love all of America, all of its parts, the good, the bad, the ugly. You got to accept all of its parts. You don't get to pick and choose what parts of history you like. The patriot loves holding up Thomas Jefferson and George Washington and all of these great heroes who are often white males, but will turn their backs on the history that even great people like Thomas Jefferson owned slaves. And even until now, the black children who came out of the loins of Thomas Jefferson family, his white family, denied those children for hundreds of years, knowing that those are their brothers and sisters. Why should you care? Because I'm your brother, I'm your sister, I'm more than your neighbor. If we really want to talk about it, my DNA says so. My DNA says so. Now, that's why you should care. This is our history. Some of it's ugly, some of it's beautiful, but nonetheless, it's our history. And how can we move forward? How can we really, when we talk about local economy, we talk about all these great things that we want to change, the police state and different things. How do we begin to have these conversations where we can respect one another if we can't even talk about our past? How can I respect you if I don't even respect what you've been through? I'm not going to have a real conversation with you. I'm going to talk at you and not talk to you. And I think we as African-American people, we experience that more than enough. If I could just speak on behalf of some Black folk for just a moment, we experience that quite enough. A lot of people want to talk at us about our history, at us about our experience, but never to us. And really get an understanding of what we've been through. And for the listener who has not been blessed with melanin at this point in history, let me make it clear that until you've had to talk to your grandmother, and I'm trying to say this without crying, because I really do not think, good God Almighty, I really don't think that a lot of people really understand. Yeah, are Black people doing some jacked up stuff right now? Yeah, but so are white people and Hispanic people and all kinds of people are doing kind of foolishness. It's not just Black folks. And I really, it disgusts me how we sensationalize Black crime when it's not the only type of crime that happens. If we're going to have a real conversation, let's have it. We can have it and we can do it with respect. But until you've had those personal experiences for yourself, where you know that you could at one point touch the face of your grandmother and know that she was not offered the same means of having a proper education here in the country that she worked in, you can't talk to me. You can't talk to me. And chances are you probably can't talk to a lot of people who look like me. You are my brother, whether you want to believe it or not, accept it or not. If you're listening, you are my brother. You are my sister. And a lot of us share blood if we share absolutely nothing else. And unfortunately, because here in the South, where it, as much as almost southern states like Tennessee, Louisiana, where people own almost as much as 50% of the people in the states own slaves. And for some of the large plantations, they own hundreds or thousands of African people. You have no idea who you're even related to. Some of us, it's so muddled here in the South. You know, my intentions are never to deny any of the beautiful things that happened to people of color. We had the Japanese that were put into concentration camps after World War II. We had the Chinese who built the railroads against their will. We have the Hispanic people who had to pressure America because they were tired of picking grapes for little to no money. I'm not going to deny the people who have gone through a lot of things just like me. But I'm telling you, there is nobody who was kept with little food, little water, little clothes, no education, and shucks out of the mouth of Abraham Lincoln himself. He said, if I could win with the Union without freeing slaves, I would. Without setting people free, if I could win the Civil War without freeing a slave, I would. To protect the Union, even our literal understanding of some of the men of the men that we herald and we hold in such high regard, in some forms were traitors to the conscious nature that God gives us, that nobody should own anybody, no matter where you're from. And nobody has a right to sabotage a people and hold them against their will and perpetually keep them ignorant so they could never rise above the ideology that they are property. Nobody has gone through that. Not one. But the African American who was brought here in the first place. Because yes, there were white people who were brought over here who were poor. They came under here under a bluff from the English crown that there would be a better life for them, and they were taken advantage of. Plenty of immigrants have been taken advantage of. Absolutely. I will not refuse the Irish. I won't refuse the Italian. I will not refuse the poor white that came from British society. I won't refuse the Chinese. I will not refuse the Japanese. I will not refuse them. The Indian, the Native American, I will not refuse them. But when we're talking about chattel slavery, so that's something totally different. A different experience, a different hierarchy. And when we get in that conversation about race, which we're going to have that conversation too this week, when we get in that conversation about race, understanding that classification happened so that even if you were poor white, yeah, you suffered in society. Even if you were an Italian, yeah, were you targeted by people like Margaret Sanger? Yeah, you were targeted too. But understand that you didn't spend 400 plus years here in the corridors, in the catacombs of what we call America, being forced to build this nation from the ground up. A lot of people who got here, if we talk about from the context of history, got here yesterday. We've been here for a long time. There is no America or Europe or Portugal or Spain or France or Germany. There is no large empire without free labor. And that is our history. That is our history. And if we're going to move forward, we got to understand where we come from. You don't know what you're fighting for if you don't know if you don't know your history. You don't know how to do something different tomorrow if you don't know the mistakes you've already made. That's why you should care. We keep getting trapped in the same things over and over because we won't learn our lesson. And I'm done with that for the day. Again, if you want to tune in on Thursday. We have the Gridiron Gang Show from my homies Keon Rose and Nick LaFew. And of course, we got the greatest guy with the bow tie, Mr. David Tullis, who's going to be coming on next. Y'all keep tuning in. We're going to have good conversations, some tough ones. But as always, if no one is taking the time to tell you that they love you today, I love you. Marie Mott loves you. And guess what? It ain't nothing you can do about that. Y'all stay tuned. Good things to come here at Chattanooga Radio 92.7.
Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4. 92.7 FM's news now.
A Rockville man stabbed to death, another savagely slashed. This happened on Rogers Road. 62-year-old LeBron Hankins was stabbed to death. When officers arrived, they found him lying on the ground.